Welcome to another episode of Talking with Docs. I'm Dr. Brad Weening.
And I'm Dr. Paul Zalzal.
Okay, today we're talking about something really current. Cade Cunningham from the Detroit Pistons has a stress fracture and has decided to undergo season-ending reconstructive surgery. Okay,
Cunningham, was he not on Happy Days?
It is not Richie Cunningham. It is Cade Cunningham, #1 draft pick 2 years ago for Detroit, vaulting them into contention this year, and unfortunately the fans in Detroit must be just devastated by this news.
Detroit, we're sorry.
It's a very treatable problem. We're going to talk a little about that. So what's a stress fracture, Paul?
A stress fracture is a fracture that occurs in bone, not because of a sudden trauma that exceeds the maximum strength of the bone.
Right, for the basketball fans watching, like Gordon Hayward's horrible tibia fracture that he had about 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's by far the most common fracture that we see, is just a fracture that overcomes the strength of the bone. This is a stress fracture, so it's a submaximal load in normal or abnormal bone that leads to a little crack, kind of like a fatigue fracture. You get little micro cracks that actually turn into a crack that you can see sometimes on x-ray, sometimes you can't see it.
Right, and the news is reporting that this is in his shin, and his shin is otherwise known as his tibia.
It's not the shibia, it's not the tibula, it's the tibia.
Those are not real words, so it is your tibia. And they don't say exactly where, and they're not sharing his x-rays with us, but
you can get a stress fracture in your hip, you can get it in your foot. It just happens to be most commonly, 50% of the time, stress fractures occur in the tibia.
Yeah, and in the hip commonly it's with runners. In the feet it can be people in the army that are doing lots of marching, just that repetitive stress.
Right.
So how do we diagnose it? How do we treat it, Paul?
Diagnosis can be tricky. The symptoms are pain. At first the symptoms are pain with that activity, with running or working out and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Then as it progresses, then you get pain with everyday activities, not just your exercises.
Yep.
Those are the symptoms. Signs, which is what happens when a doctor picks up on physical exam or a healthcare professional, is point tenderness. He'll push or she'll push over the part where they think the stress fracture is, and it'll hurt. That's pretty obvious,
yes.
But that's a sign of it. And then you move on to investigations. And the investigations we always start with in orthopedics is
X-ray.
Always start with an X-ray. Don't get an ultrasound. X-ray. And then you might see it on X-ray.
Yep.
However, you might not.
Right, so CT then. Usually we go to CT or even MRI?
If you don't see it on X-ray, yeah, you can go to other investigations.
Or bone scan, actually.
We used to use bone scans, and they were good. Then there was a paper that came out that said, hey, MRI is better than bone scan.
Yeah.
So now we usually go to bone scan,
Yep.
and they light up on the T1 or the T2 image as a little bit.
You mean MRI?
MRI, what did I say?
Bone scan.
No. Bone scan, we use bone scan. I just said that. I know. MRI, where you see some swelling in the bone, on the T1 or T2 image, you'll see some edema, some swelling, and that'll indicate that you have a fracture. That's the symptoms, signs, investigations of a stress fracture.
Okay, so treatment. So if someone says, Doc, you diagnosed me with a stress fracture, what am I going to do now?
Wow. Usually we try and treat things non-operatively.
Agreed.
Always. Why do you got to jump to surgery every time?
And that's why they tried with Cade Cunningham, hoping that he could just take a little time off, put him on the disabled list, bring him back after 10 to 14 days, maybe get a play. His pain persisted, preventing him from being able to perform.
There is in the tibia a stress fracture. If it occurs in the front of the tibia, the anterior aspect, that's the tension part, because the tibia is bowed. And if you see that on X-ray, we call it the dreaded black line.
Dreaded black line.
Sounds worse than it is.
Bones do not do well in tension.
Dreaded black line. If you have an anterior tibial stress fracture, often we will jump right into surgery, which is an open reduction internal fixation, and the most common way to do it is with an intramedullary nail.
A rod. So that's probably what he's getting. Again, we haven't seen his x-rays, but that's probably what he's getting.
But sometimes on that anterior stress fracture, they can put a tension plate on, but usually it's a rod we put in, an intramedullary nail in the tibia.
So say you don't need surgery though.
Okay.
What are we doing?
Well, just protect weight bearing. Get some crutches and don't put any weight on. In the tibia, just protect the weight bearing. Consider a bone stimulator.
Right, and also consider removing the activity that led to the stress fracture.
Yeah.
If you're a marcher or a basketball player or whatever, remove that activity, rest it, bone stimulator, some other location, sometimes a cast or some other type of support, and then diet is another one. So a lot of people are saying, hey, Cade Cunningham, he went all plant-based. So here's a couple things about plant-based eating. So some people believe that this leads to increased fractures. There was one paper that showed that they had a 20% increase in fracture. However, when you tease through all the data, these people had very low BMIs, and a low BMI certainly increases your risk of having a fracture.
Body mass index.
Yes, body mass index. Cade Cunningham actually gained 20 pounds in the off-season, and some people are saying, well, maybe it's his extra weight that caused it. With respect to diet, things that can increase your chances of having a stress fracture or weak bones would include reduced vitamin D, reduced calcium, reduced B12, as well as reduced protein. And it's possible that Cade Cunningham is deficient in some of these. He probably has a team of people working on it though. One other thing though is the latitude that he lives at is in Detroit. It is very similar to Canada. There's not a lot of sun, so there is a chance that he is vitamin D deficient, and we suspect his team of medical professionals are investigating this while he gets ready for surgery.
So you can learn from his stress fracture.
Yes.
If you change your workout routine, you increase it, you start running more, marching more, whatever it is, and you start getting some pain in your foot or your shin or your hip, go get it checked out.
Yep.
Because the earlier that the stress fracture is diagnosed,
yes,
the easier it is to treat. If you let it go on too long, it can become more difficult to treat and you might need surgery. So you're not going to be a marcher or a runner or a basketball player for a while. You're going to be a sitter,
yep,
a coucher, and a video game player until this heals.
For sure. And so we're wishing Cade Cunningham all the best, even though he is in the same division as the Toronto Raptors. We still want him to get well because we'd love to see him play. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel.
And remember, you are in charge of your own health.
See you next time.